So if you're out of the San Diego area, our ability to directly help you will be a little bit more limited, but I'd still love to have a conversation and try and connect with you with whoever we do know. And, we're always looking to make new friends and to find new resources.
Hey, welcome to the Leadership Loading Podcast. I'm Jason McClaren.
Yeah, I'm Jay Wiley.
So, Jay, welcome to the show today. We're talking about your career. I know you started out in the Navy, and so let's talk about your background. What led you to join the Navy, and then we'll go from there.
You bet. It's a funny story, I think, in that I decided that I wanted to be a naval officer, a military officer, since I was about 7 years old. I grew up in the 70s watching my heroes on TV, John Wayne and James Bond, and I really had a thing for Pappy Boyington. I thought he was pretty cool. And I said, I want to be part of something bigger than myself. And so I said, I'm going to do what they do. I want to be a hero. And so I did everything I could through high school and junior high, didn't get any trouble, studied really hard, and got an ROTC scholarship, and then wound up going to USC on a Navy ROTC scholarship. And that was kind of my entree into the military. And I had a very good career, really for the first 20 years of it. But some stuff happened along the way, and really what happened was that I found out that I had two major character defects. I didn't know this at the time. I found out through self-reflection. I had a lot of fear and I had a lot of perfectionism. In some ways, that made me very effective as a leader because I was always anticipating crises or problems. What could go wrong. I always had contingency plans, and I was able to just jump off and solve the problem. But it was a very hard way to live because it was just stressful. It was incredibly stressful because I was always worried. I was always anxious. And unfortunately, those heroes that I admired, the other thing that they tended to do was drink. And I saw that. And so I thought that would be an effective coping strategy. And so what happened was that I ended up drinking in order to deal with that stress and those fears. And so my life became this cycle of fear. My number one fear was letting down my troops or failing at the mission. That was my terrifying. I wasn't so worried about getting hurt or killed. That would have been fine with me. But letting those guys down, failing at the mission was unthinkable. But the thing was, I actually was pretty successful. I was pretty successful in the different evolutions we were doing. But because of my perfectionism, I was setting standards that were so unrealistic for myself that I perceived failure. So my life became this cycle of fearing failure in an upcoming evolution, executing and doing it pretty well, but then obsessing over the 5 to 10% that didn't go well. And the only way I knew how to turn off those feelings was drinking. Well, as time went on, I actually was really good at my job and I kept getting promoted. And so that just added more responsibility and more accountability and more fear. And so I had to drink more and more and more to cope with those feelings. Well, I wound up being a commanding officer of a destroyer. So I was the commanding officer of a guided missile destroyer. I took the ship on a 7-month deployment. We fought pirates, we fought terrorists, we destroyed a pirate skiff in the act of trying to capture a tanker. We rescued 55 mariners at sea, and all of my sailors came back alive. If they left with 10 fingers and toes, they came back with 10 fingers and toes. I'm very, very proud of that. Unfortunately, not every commander in my squadron can say that. But the problem was when my crew found out that I like to drink, I never had an empty hand, and I could no longer hide my drinking. I was on a microscope slide, so I wound up getting myself in all kinds of trouble. I broke every rule in the captain book. I ended up getting relieved of command, and then I ended up getting asked to leave the Navy rather abruptly. But as painful as that was at the time, it's the best thing that ever happened to me because that is what enabled me to ask for help and for me to get sober. I think the three hardest words in the English language are "I need help." And that's what I was able to say. And so basically that's led me into my second career of helping other veterans to achieve sobriety and using my story and the leadership skills that I learned in the military to help lead others to sobriety.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. I think the first thing I was interested in, what you said, is the ROTC scholarship. So I was a JROTC, was like my whole beginning. What, as I went into high school, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I'm going in the military, so I did JROTC because I knew if I did achieve certain things in JROTC, I could get another rank when I enlisted. For those that don't know, you can go into ROTC, and then that gets you a reserve track, or sorry, officer track when you get in. So that was one thing I did, and I planned on retiring and teaching JRTC when I got out with my whole life career. The second thing you talked about was the drinking. Obviously, I think the Navy has a big connotation with drinking. But obviously, all the services have that. I was in the Air Force, and I had drank a lot more while I was in than I did before I joined and after I left the military. I actually, when I left the military, I didn't drink for probably a year and a half period. And then obviously started going back to social drinking and that sort of thing. And even now, maybe twice, 2 beers a month or something, if I'm working out on the farm and getting a sweat going. But I think, like you said, there's such that camaraderie that usually camaraderie is felt around the bar, around the bonfire, or wherever you're at if you're deployed, and drinking just comes out. That's just what people think we have to do. Of course, now I don't think that. I think that I can easily sip on some sweet tea, you know, rather than a Corona or whatever it is. So I think that's the other thing. And then of course, you talk about transitioning. We can dive into that. So anything on those two topics before we go into transition?
There's a lot of different ways to get into the military. The military has a lot of very good programs where you can get a college education, and then based on that degree, you can potentially get a commission. The programs have changed a lot. I came in the late 1900s, so things have changed a lot since then. But I think it is a good path. I think it was a good path for me. And I think the other thing, the drinking culture, it is a big thing in the military. I think there's a lot of self-medicating. I think a lot of military members are using um, alcohol and in some cases drugs. I mean, yes, there is a zero tolerance policy. I get that, but also, there's ways around that for some folks, and for some folks, they just don't care because it hurts too bad. And military medicine, unfortunately, I think um, has kind of reinforced that a little bit because we needed people to get back into the front lines, and so when people were coming back from deployments, a lot of times they were being prescribed medications to keep them going rather than maybe doing the deeper dive and doing group therapy and other things that are very effective for helping deal with trauma and psychological wounds. So, it's definitely a very real thing. I should say, I think the military is trying to change that, but I don't know how successful they are. And, you know, um, I think it's just something that it's an awareness now that, we as veterans and even active duty service members need to think about, because just like you said, many of those activities that we do don't have to have alcohol involved for them to be enjoyable. And the alcohol is leading to a lot of very unfortunate incidents, I think, across the military, because it does really lower inhibitions and impairs judgment. And so a lot of those events that are actually quite fun wind up being, in some cases tragic because, alcohol was involved. DUIs, automobile accidents, military sexual trauma, you name it. Lots of very bad things can happen. I do think we just need to be aware of it.
And is that what you guys are doing over there at Veteran Navigation Center? Is it mostly focused on transitioning for sobriety, or just transitioning period?
Well, that's a good question. We actually have two organizations. The first one is called Confidential Recovery, and that's an intensive outpatient treatment program for substance use disorder. We've been around since 2014, and we've been connected with the VA since 2019, and that is purely focused on helping veterans to get sober. Essentially, a veteran goes to the VA and does a alcohol screening or a drug and alcohol screening based on having some kind of issue, and then they're referred to us for treatment, and they stay with us And we do our very best to get them sober. And a lot of our counselors are veterans as well, and a lot of us are in recovery as well. And what's happened is we've created this small community of veterans in recovery. And what we found was that so many of the veterans who were coming to see us had other issues, above and beyond the substance abuse. And so we tried to help them, with these other problems, legal issues, family issues, jobs, housing, you name it, benefits. And we wanted to do this in a better way. So what we did was we founded the Veterans Navigation Center, which is a nonprofit. And the concept is we take a veteran who has been through our program or is a volunteer, we get them trained to be a certified peer support specialist. And then we have that veteran act as a veteran peer navigator. And then veterans from the community can call in to the Veterans Navigation Center with any problem. But this veteran peer navigator connects with this veteran who's calling in, asks them to come in and meet with them in person and develop a little rapport, some trust. And then once they have that trust, they basically say, hey, I know you said you had a problem with whatever, but we want to make sure we're not missing anything. We want to get to know the whole you. Would you mind just answering a few questions? And then they do a holistic assessment, simple layman's terms. Do you have food? Do you have a place to live? Do you have a job? Do you want a better job? Is anybody hurting you? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Do you think maybe you have a problem with drugs and alcohol? And if they say yes to any of these, 10 or 20 questions, then we say, hey, I can't help but notice you had a concern with X. Would you like to sit down with a counselor and do a little deeper dive? And then we can come up with a plan for how to deal with this problem. And then, if they say yes, then they do clinical assessments. We determine level of need. And we come up with a tailored plan for all of their problems, not just onesie twosie. And this happens pretty frequently. We'll have someone contact us and say, hey, I got a bad discharge. I want a discharge upgrade. And we'll be like, okay, do you mind if I ask why you got that bad discharge? Oh, I really like drugs. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, maybe we can help you with that too. And, that gets rid of the root cause that's causing these other problems. And, I think it's that rapport, that trust that's built up that encourages the veteran to be more willing to be open and honest about their problems. And the last part of it is that veteran peer navigator now stays connected with that veteran. Now they're a sponsor, an accountability partner, they're a wingman, battle buddy, shipmate, whatever you want to call it, but they stay engaged with that veteran. They encourage them to stay on their path, and a lot of times, the veteran will give them some resources, and then we'll follow up and say, hey, did you call Billy Bob, the guy who can help you with that car problem? And the answer might be, well, no, I didn't. And then we'll say, well, why? And they'll say, well, I was scared. And it's like, okay, totally understandable. Come on in. We'll call them together. You have to dial the numbers. It's really important. You got to participate in your own recovery. But I'm going to be sitting here right next to you. And if you hear anything you don't want to hear, it's going to be okay. I'm going to catch you and we'll find another solution. You're not alone. The VA tells us that over 80% of the veterans who take their own life by suicide have never asked for help. So we're trying to get inside that decision loop, establish this bond of trust, and make it okay to ask for help and to trust someone, and who better to trust than a fellow vet, in particular a fellow vet in recovery. So that's kind of the concept between the two groups.
Yeah, and that's similar to what when we started Go Heroes, we did transition strictly like resume interview, mock interviews, that sort of thing. And then the immediate thing we got was, oh, there's already tons of groups that do that. Well, I like how you guys have kind of niched down to the San Diego area. And that's what we've done here. We niched to the East Texas area. As far as that transition assistance, we do other things, but even this podcast, is global or reach. And so I think if
that's part of what we want to do is we'd like to export the model to other communities, but like you were talking about, we are only familiar with the resources that are next to us, right? So it's very difficult to help a veteran in South Carolina just because we don't know what the resources are there. But if you were to take our model and drop it in South Carolina and find some veterans there who were willing to execute the model, I think that would work.
Yeah, definitely. Even here in Texas, there's lots of veteran resources, and there's a group, I won't call them out, but they've put us on their resource directory, which is fine, but they misclassified us. So we get a lot of calls at over veterans like, "Oh, I need some money to pay my mortgage, or I need this." I'm like, "Well, we don't do that." So then I end up, referring them to trusted partners and outreach groups. So there's lots of resources out there. It's just, I don't know, maybe we can take it on as, categorizing them better or something. I think it's just hard to find them usually. But
Well, that's really what we're trying to do. What we would like to do is to create this integrated network of community partners. So this be this seamless handoff between organizations and with those other resources. We're not trying to take that veteran away. We're trying to get them connected because why would we recreate the wheel? If you're already doing something really well, we just want to introduce the veteran to you so you can help them. You know, we don't know what we don't know. We're trying to learn in the community who does what and who does what well. Like I like what you said, trusted partners, so that we can do that warm handoff so that the veteran doesn't fall through the crack in between providers because no one provider can do everything. And I think that's the goal. The other thing we're trying to do is to reach out into the general community, not just the veteran community, not just the recovery community, but the general community. And we're trying to encourage everyone to do a screening for veteran status. And not to say, are you a veteran, but to say, did you ever serve in the military? Because there's a lot of veterans out there who don't consider themselves veterans because either they got a bad discharge or had a bad experience, or they're like, I was only in for 2 years. Oh, I was only in the guard, or I never saw combat, and they never pursue their veteran benefits. Which is really a tragedy. I had an uncle, my wife's uncle actually, who served in submarines in the 1960s and 70s, and he didn't go back to the VA until just recently. And I knew this guy. I just assumed I never had any idea he had never pursued his veteran benefits, which is crazy. And the other thing I would say is that you know, if we are not the right people to help someone, we just want to find the right person who is. It's not going to hurt, it's not going to hurt our feelings. We want to get you the right person. So I really applaud what you're talking about there. Being that connection and making that referral is a huge advantage. A lot of veterans are drowning in a sea of goodwill. There's all these things out there they can take advantage of, and they don't know what to do because it's too much. It's overwhelming, and they're not sure who to trust or who to turn to. And just having a trusted agent who can help, connect them with the right resource for the problem that they're trying to solve, that's a huge win. So I think that's kind of what we just need to keep doing is just, building this veteran community.
yeah, definitely. I think definitely not a shortage, or sorry, definitely not an overage of veteran assistance out there. Like I said, it's just getting people connected to the right things, and like I said, some of this is not even veteran groups. I know for veterans that are interested, or if they're starting a business or a nonprofit, there's resources out there from the for-profit side. I know, like for us, we use several softwares we get for free because we're a nonprofit. That sort of thing. That it's just knowing where to get them, and that's what we've been working on, is building that directory or that resource guide locally, obviously, that we can help connect people. So Jay, what's your 1 minute leadership tip for new leaders?
So a couple things. One is, you know, um, it may sound trite, but never let them see you sweat. A lot of times your team is going to be gauging their behavior, their attitude, their mood on you. So there's a little bit of cheerleader, there's a little bit of confidence, it's a little bit of an acting, but just remember that when you're with the team, you've got to portray that calm and that vision. Um, February the 2nd, 2011, I walked onto the bridge and witnessed a pirate skiff coming alongside a tanker, engaging them with small arms and RPGs. And at that moment, we were going to go into combat. And I realized that if I panicked or I started getting excited, the crew was getting excited. So I tried to, be as calm as I could, spoke clearly, plainly, kept everyone calm, and we did it just like we trained. And we ended up destroying the pirate skiff and rescuing the mariners. But I had to stop myself because I was getting excited. I had to model the behavior that I wanted that team to have. The second thing is I was in command. Email is just a freaking killer. I always felt like I had to go sit in my cabin and be on that blankety blank computer and answer emails and do the admin. And, I hated it. I was good at it, but I hated it. But I also knew that that's not what my job was. My job was to be out and about and engage with the crew and to be present. The crew, you signal to your team what your priorities are by your presence. If you miss sailor's reenlistment, what you're saying to the crew is you don't matter. That ceremony doesn't matter to me because I've got more important things to do. Very rarely that kind of thing would happen, but I made it a point to be at every significant event. And I just walked around. I inspected my ship. The chiefs used to hate it because I'd go walk around and I'd find something that was broken and I'd say, hey, why is this broken? But you expect what you inspect. And I think that's a big part of what we're losing as leaders is you can't, yes, you have to do the admin, but do that in your own time. When the crew's there, when the team is there, they're the priority. When I did my command qualification board, I studied tactics and seamanship and programs and all this stuff. And every question I got was about people and about people programs and how would you manage people. And the number one thing that my Commodore told me was, Jay, the essence of command is knowing what rules to break, when to break them, how to document, and who to tell. And that stayed with me ever since.
Definitely have a similar mindset of being a former firefighter and director of different departments. You like you said, you expect what you inspect, and I think that drives it home to your guys. So Jay, how could people get a hold of you if they want to reach out directly or through the Veterans Navigation Center?
So the best thing, we have two websites. I think that's probably the easiest way. Confidentialrecovery.com.
Definitely. All right. Well, Jay, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.